Residual! A 2D survival platformer and the latest game to come from Orange Pixel. Hi! My name is Tom and you are here with me on Player One where I'll be sharing my review of Residual. What is Residual? Residual starts off with you selecting one of three characters. I chose an unnamed person on the left for my first run, and a middle person on my other runs. After you select your character, you crash on your first procedurally generated planet. And that's the start of the game. You're now free to explore this unfamiliar environment with yourself and your trusty robot sidekick, who is named Petty B. Petty is that classic robot sidekick who's there to give you helpful tips and quick quips, which will stay fresh and entertaining for a very long time in the game. First, thoughts. Before we're able to get into any gameplay, I always like to go into the options of a game, and Residual had some interesting choices for us. The first thing I noticed was I really wanted to dig into the settings, make sure this game played for me, and, I clicked on settings, and there's no settings to change here. This is all kind of video game experience settings. Okay, sure. So what I actually needed was in preferences. Cool. I can change the game. For some reason, it booted on my computer into 4K. I don't have a 4K monitor yet, still, here we go. I can change it from full screen to, that's all the graphics settings. It's just full screen. Platforming. This game is a platformer. You jump around, you control your character, jump on platforms. Great. One thing users might find when they really get into the game is the controls are really awkward at the start. It's bound to WASD instead of the arrow keys on your keyboard. As well, the action buttons are misplaced when you're trying to use that, but fortunately, Residual did have the ability for me to change those controls, which made the experience better. Not good. Better. Residual really struggles with its platforming when you get into the finer tuned jumping. And it sounds weird to say, I've never been good at platformers, but when you press down the jump button, your character will endlessly jump. Look at them go. They're having so much fun. At first, this was something I didn't particularly notice or care about. As you begin to play and you take yourself deeper into the game, it's the fine-tuned jumping that becomes a lot harder when it's not just one press, one jump. Residual also has a lot of vines to jump around on when you're underground, and they are not fun to use. The game doesn't really have much in terms of platforming puzzles, more along the lines of controlled puzzles, and it really pushes you into how difficult the controls can be when you're trying to swing on these vines or ledge climb. Ledge climbing is another thing that Residual has in its platforming tool belt, but it really failed with me. I struggled to enjoy it as it would take the pacing out of the jumping, slow you right down as you jumped against a wall, and slowly pull yourself up. And it felt less intuitive. It would come in when I didn't really want it to, because the controls were, if you jump at a wall, you kind of ledge climb onto it. Sure, these aren't big issues when it comes to a game, but to be able to enjoy a platformer, I want to feel like my jumps count. That takes skill to being able to jump around. Residual felt like I was lucky if I could press my buttons right, and it wasn't an experience I enjoyed. However, there was one thing I did enjoy with the platforming. Sometimes, when you fall, you do a little roll. Look at him, a little roll. He did a little roll. And it felt so satisfying, just the roll. It was, clean. So my favorite part about Residual's platforming was falling down. But this is not just a platformer. No, this is a 2D survival platformer. Survival. Typically in a survival game, you have threats. Stuff that challenge your life, or your survival. In Residual, you have the threat of your HP and stamina. Your energy. Something. See, in the top left of Residual's HUD, you have your HP, which is the red bar, and you have, the green bar. I don't know what it means. It's the green bar. And it goes up when you eat fruit, and it goes down when... I don't know when it goes down. And then beneath that, you have a battery one that appears every now and then. I'm not sure what makes it appear. It does things. Normally it's full every time I see it appear. Sometimes it's a little unfull. However, every time the game tells me I'm low on energy, I will have nearly full every bar. I can never tell what's going on. In Residual, you have the threat of your HP and the threat of your energy. I'm really not sure what it is, but Petty B keeps reminding me that it's running low and that I'm about to die, and then I die. I cannot figure out what it is, and I find that survival games where you do know how you're gonna die and how you can improve can be really fun. Dying can be a core part of the experience of the game. However, in Residual, without knowing how you're dying, it became a really unfun experience. In Residual, another part of the survival is your tools and your items. Or I shouldn't actually be calling them items. There's 4 categories of things that you possess, and one of them is items. It makes me ask the question, what is an item? The food's not items? Are my tools not items? Sure, I could see craftables not being items. It's sort of things I don't have yet, but items in Residual, some of them you can find across the surface of the planet. Some you can find beneath. Some resources you need to dig and use your tools to find. And all of them can be used to make craftables that help you survive, help you progress, and get your ship off of the planet. I found Residual, although it holds your hand for the food, really lets go when it tells you on what you need to craft and what you need to survive. Part of the game's story and its mechanics is getting off of the planet, and you have a little progress tracker that helps you know what you need to collect. I got really stuck on this. The game tells you what it needs, but it doesn't really tell you how to get it. And it also doesn't tell you what things are and what they do and how they interact with each other. Some things are intuitive. In games, you pick it up and you're like, okay, I know what to do here. But however, in Residual, and this comes in with the art, it struggles to stand out what some items do and how they function. One item you start the game with is called the Blazer. And it is described in the game as a suit-powered particle beam. That sounds pretty badass. I'm cool. I'm gonna suit-powered particle beam some stuff. I'm gonna really blast them. I don't know how it works. The survival in this game, it is true. You do have to survive. The struggle is figuring out how, and sometimes why. 2D. I can confirm that this game is in fact 2D. But let's actually talk about Residual's art. Residual is an 8-bit style game. If you took a screenshot of Residual and showed this to me, I would tell you it looks great. In fact, a lot of the pixel art and the work looks fantastic. But when you get to play Residual, a lot of this art and this creativity becomes noise. I found myself really struggling to tell what was environmentally interesting or differentiating between each block when there was a lot of noise on the screen. As well, with 8-bit, you are limited to the definition you give in tools. A lot of items aren't distinct enough in their design that I can really tell what they're supposed to do or what they're supposed to be used for when I pick them up. Same with a lot of resources and foods, although I could say, hey, that's an orange circle, and it is an orange. It gets a little bit more complicated when you're looking at the metals or the craftables and what everything's supposed to be. Another thing I really struggled with was what an enemy was, or what a hazard was. This goes into survival, but I struggled a lot with some of the enemy designs. I couldn't tell if they actually were enemies. Your character is attacked, I think. When your character is attacked, there isn't really much of a reaction or a response from the game to notify you. If you pay attention to your health bar, you notice it's gone down. Your character seems to shrug it off and keep moving along. And this can be a real hindrance when long playtimes, you get really immersed into the game, traversing caverns. When you look at your HP and you find out that it's actually quite low, it can be hard to really pick up where all of these damages and these little bits have come from when the game doesn't really tell you when you're hurt just by playing it rather than observing it. The conclusion. So here we come. to the most important part of the review. After around 2 hours of gameplay, I had to ask myself what reason I had to keep going. According to the game, I had completed 46%. However, I found it really hard. I believe that there probably is a good game in here, and that in myself, I have missed it. A lot of other people seem to really enjoy Residual, yet I find myself struggling to find a reason to come back and keep playing it. Residual from the start had nothing that was rather hooking or fascinating about its gameplay mechanics or world, to the point where I had to ask, if I keep going, will it get better, or is it worth it? Is it worth me playing through unfun platforming, confusing survival mechanics, and a visually noisy system to get to a good thing hours later? And I decided it's not. But some people might. Some people might be able to dig under the surface of this planet and find the resources they need to really enjoy Residual. I couldn't. For that, I give Residual a 4.5 out of 10. You've been here with me, Tom, on Player One on Sin.